What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Coach Steve Show podcast. Make sure you hit the like button and the subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Follow it, rate it, leave a comment in the comment section down below. Rate it on Apple and iTunes, and it's available wherever you get your podcasts. Also, make sure you check out the Belly Up Media Network at bellyupsports.com. Check out all the podcasts and blogs and everything they have there. It's stuff there, not just podcast or just podcast about sports. There's pretty much anything. So go do all that. Today, we're going to discuss Notre Dame football, the team everybody wants to talk about. Conference realignment is a thing of the future. Sometimes change is good. Sometimes change is needed. We get comfortable, and sometimes change is good. Sometimes we get too caught up in tradition. Sometimes we just stay where we are, our feet where we are, and we don't move forward. Well, Notre Dame, we're going to talk about, should you join a conference? So that's what we're going to talk about today on the show. Again, thanks anybody that watches and or listens and all that good stuff. So let's talk about Notre Dame football. We're not going to talk about their win and loss record. Literally, we're going to talk about conference realignments. Now, the big drop happened last year when Texas and Oklahoma decided to leave the Big 12. They're going to head over to the SEC. So the SEC is growing. There's talks about super conferences. Okay. Then the big ball dropped where the USC Trojans and UCLA Bruins are heading to the Big 10. So they can spend tons of time in an airplane traveling to play in the Big 10. But this is a smart move. Everything revolves around money. This is a smart move for the Big 10. They now get the LA market. So now the LA market can see other Big 10 teams. They get that money and everything else. That's why some schools have not fit the Big 10 criteria. You have to fit in academics. You have to fit it in. Are you going to get anything out of that media market? That's why people have talked about, well, Iowa State's right there. Does Iowa State join the Big 10? Well, they could probably join and compete with some of the teams in the Big 10. But what does that media market actually bring? You already have the state of Iowa with the Iowa Hawkeyes. So does Iowa State really bring anything to the table? With these conference realignments and teams being talked about moving around, the next logical thing to happen is probably Notre Dame. They were the team that everybody was waiting for. The Big 10 was in talks with the likes of Oregon or Washington and everybody else to come on over, but they were waiting on Notre Dame. Then those teams decided to go talk to the Big 12, and now it sounds like nothing will come out of the Pac-12 or the Big 12, even though I think something will. Now these are happening in a year from now, 2 years from now. So this year we can enjoy Texas, Oklahoma, staying in the Big 12 for right now. We can enjoy USC and UCLA being in the Pac-12 one more time. But the big domino that everybody's waiting to fall is Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a weird bird where football is independent. Basketball, and I believe the rest of the sports, are all they were part of Big East and all that, and then they're part of the ACC. When COVID hit, the only way Notre Dame was going to play football is if they're in a conference, because you were only playing conference opponents. You couldn't do this inter travel. They wanted to be in the conferences. So in order for them to play football, they had to join a conference. Well, ACC's got room, so they said, come on over. So that was the first time the football team had played in a conference, probably ever, if maybe ever. And I believe they ended up winning it. So, they did that. Now they're back to being independent. Another thing, again, all comes back to money. Notre Dame has their own TV deal with NBC. So, like I said, you might hate Notre Dame, kind of like you hate the Dallas Cowboys, but I guarantee they're on your TV because NBC is going to have them on. So they're independent. So when these conference realignments were happening, one of the things waiting is Notre Dame. Now, people want Notre Dame for a couple reasons. That's a brand name. That is a huge brand name. Like I said, you are watching them because they're on TV, because it's a national name brand. Same way you watch the Cowboys. Probably now because you watch the Patriots, they have become a big brand name. You're going to watch them. Probably same for baseball, and people watch the likes of the Yankees and other teams. They're a brand name, big national brand name. There are Irish fans all over the place. There's Cowboys fans all over the place. You're going to watch Notre Dame football. So these conferences, even though they're not sitting there necessarily jumping and fighting to get them. Any conference is going to want Notre Dame to join them. Which one makes more logical sense? And having some conversation, some say it's the ACC because of travel. Some say it's the ACC because other sports have already been involved in it. And during COVID year, they were already in it. But it's going to come down to a couple things, I think, for Notre Dame. One is tradition. Tradition is they're independent. Tradition is they got to play these schools in their schedule that are rivals. Oh, we've always played them. We've always done this. Not to say this is the same thing, but in coaching, one of the worst things you can say is this is the way things have always been done. Sometimes change is good. Tradition can be broken. Now, I don't mean tradition in your school and your program. I don't mean any of that. So, for example, tradition is they walk out there and they slap the play like a champion today. That's tradition. You don't get rid of that. There's certain rituals is the best way to describe it in your football program that's been there since it was there. Yes, those you don't get rid of. Tradition, playing certain schools, has proven to be thrown out the window. When USC decided to join the Big Ten, they're getting rid of some of that, playing some of those Pac-12 schools they've always played. Maybe they don't play Notre Dame now because Notre Dame now cannot schedule them because now USC is going to be in a bigger conference with more teams. So we have seen that some tradition can be thrown away, quote unquote rivals. Rival schools have stopped playing each other. You've seen it, or they don't play each other every year. We get lucky, we see Michigan, Ohio State play every year. We get Alabama, Auburn. We get those type, but there's more than just one rivalry school that for each one. So we've proven that sometimes change is needed. And the other downfall with Notre Dame being independent is while every other school out there is fighting for a playoff spot and they end their regular season with a good record, they have to go now play their conference championship game. And losing that game could knock them out of a playoff spot. But Notre Dame can go 12-0 and only play those 12 games and not that 13th game and squeak their way in. Now, not saying that they don't deserve it. Being 12-0 is something to be accomplished. Being 11-1 is something to be accomplished. They look at it as, well, that's not our fault that you're in a conference. But I think it's time that Notre Dame football joins a conference to get the accolades of it, to get money, big-time rights, build up that brand name, bring more money to that conference, which gives you more money, help scopes recruiting landscapes for you as a program, not just football and every sport. What has been holding this up? It's been tradition. It's been their own TV deal. And because they're Notre Dame, this is the way they've always done it. It's time to not do the way it's always been done. It's time to move on. Media rights probably been a pretty big deal. So looking at an article talking about where will Notre Dame land, will it be the Big Ten or the SEC? And I think the ACC has a dog in the fight here, but they don't have the big time TV rights as the Big Ten, and they're not as big of a conference talked about in the SEC. This says the Big Ten and the SEC will be considered the favorites to land Notre Dame. ACC is likely, though, in the mix. But it's the Big Ten and the SEC that are likely to pull Notre Dame in, given the strengths of their media rights package. Notre Dame is a little more difficult because you just don't know what they don't think the same way we do. I think the SEC is a perfect landing spot for them, but there's so much history. There's the churn of the nose towards the academics. Several schools down here that the Big Ten is a better marriage if they went somewhere. They talk about Notre Dame getting a $75 million in media rights deal because you're looking at whatever they make for the NBC deal. What are they going to want to make from another deal? Do they want to keep their NBC deal and still join the Big Ten, get a little bit of money, but get some back because they keep their NBC deal? Mr. Feinbaum, who talks about college football a lot, says they can't get that type of money in the ACC. I'm sure they've popped off in the past about the ACC, but the ACC is in trouble because of this type of deal. And they're dealing with powerful companies like ESPN and Fox and others, and they're as good as their product, and their product is good football. Don't misunderstand me, but outside of a handle of those schools, you're not going to get eyeballs over the versus what you're about to see in the Big Ten, the SEC, and he's talking about Notre Dame going to the ACC. Aside from Notre Dame, and then they go on to talk about another schools that could transfer. But Notre Dame's talking about the $75 million that they want to get from this TV deal. He goes on to say, I think Notre Dame will end up in the Big Ten if they go somewhere because it makes too much sense. And I don't know what the history is with Fielding Yost and things that happened before he was born. We're talking about 100 years ago. He loved them in the SEC, but I don't think they're going to be able to convince the people that really matter at Notre Dame, and that's the administration, that this is where they should be. It would reek to some people that they're just a pure money grab. Notre Dame, even though everything does football-wise is about money, doesn't want anybody else to know that. It always comes down to money. Always. So, what makes most sense for Notre Dame to join a conference? You're going to make a case for the ACC because other sports are part of it. Basketball plays in it. They were in it during COVID. And the travel is all right there. But if you want to talk about trying to keep some tradition, well, now you can go play Michigan. You could play in Indiana and go play, since you're in Indiana, go play Ohio State. USC is joining the Big Ten. You then can join and go play them. That's part of your tradition that you care so much about. And even though NBC wants to still air these games, Big Ten is about to renew their contract to get a bigger TV deal. So is Notre Dame waiting to see what type of deal that is? Or are they in talks with it right now? And we're waiting to see the type of numbers they're going to get. They would get more money from being on TV playing in the Big Ten than they would the ACC. ACC has good teams. There's some good football there. But slowly, it's going to wither away when you compare the two. Because now if you're Notre Dame, you join the Big Ten. You'll get the media market in New Jersey, around that New Jersey, New York area because of Rutgers and Maryland. You're going to get the TV type of deals in other states, and then you're going to get the LA market. You already get part of the Chicago market with the NBC, but now it's going to boost up because it's the Big Ten. Because you got the Northwestern, you got Illinois. You're going to look at Nebraska, even though what is that bring in that? You're going to get more money in the Big Ten than you are in ACC. And I personally think Notre Dame can compete in the Big Ten and might be able to compete for Big Ten titles. Good football is being played there. Then it opens up recruiting. Now Notre Dame's a brand name. It's a national name. They can go over to the United States and recruit and get those type of people all over. But you join a conference now. Now you can go and get this big national recruiting. That's why USC kind of was part of their decision to join the Big Ten was money. But also, too, it opens up their recruiting. Now they can go to other states that the Big Ten's in. They can go out to the New York market. They can go out to the New Jersey market. Why do you think Texas and Oklahoma are joining the SEC? Now they get that recruiting. It's all about recruiting. It's all about money. It's all about that national exposure to help keep your program going. So for Notre Dame, you join the Big Ten, that's what you get. Now, talking about them going to the SEC, that also fits. But here's the thing with Notre Dame. Now, they have a great football team. They have great sports teams. You have to look at where you can compete year in and year out. The competitive side is going to say, let's join the SEC because that's where maybe the quote-unquote best football is. Look at all the athletes, in all those states. We're Notre Dame, we're a brand name, we join the SEC, we'll be able to do this. It's going to be a bloodbath in the SEC. It's going to be a bloodbath. So you have to look at the numbers. What type of money we're going to get from the SEC market, from that TV deal? Do we want to, every other year, every 2 years, start to compete for that SEC title because you've got the likes of Alabama, you've got Georgia, those teams on the rise. Texas A&M's a little bit on the rise. Now you're adding Texas and them into the mix. All these schools. Arkansas is getting better, Mississippi State, LSU. So you got these type of teams going on. The travel, you have to travel to California probably once a year, but you were doing that anyway, playing USC. You were doing that anyway, sometimes playing those other teams out there. So the travel to me doesn't matter as much. But in the SEC, do you get different recruits then? Is that a gamble you're willing to take? Or would you rather play in the Big Ten, where if you do manage to get to the Big Ten championship, if you manage to get to the playoff after playing the Big Ten, you're not quite as beat up as you might be in the SEC. That's just something to think about. But I think the way where Notre Dame is located, the way how they play football, fits in the Big Ten. Their academics, their school fits better in the Big Ten than it does the ACC or the SEC. And I think Notre Dame will bring a little something to the Big Ten. I think it will fit in well. Then you're going to have multiple teams in that conference that can compete to do very well. And then you add Notre Dame, Big Ten can turn around and go talk to a Washington, maybe try to get Oregon over and try to get those, because now you could sit there and say, okay, we've added Notre Dame, let's add this. But Notre Dame could be the final stop for the Big Ten, but they probably want to add another team to try to make things even. So that's just another way. So now you look to the likes of Oregon or anybody else that was in the Pac-12, and maybe you go after another Big 12 school and say, look, now we've got Notre Dame brand. So now more eyeballs will be on your school when Notre Dame plays you because Notre Dame is on people's TVs. So I think personally it fits better for Notre Dame to go to the Big Ten, add more to the Big Ten, add more for the school. Notre Dame, it's time for a change. Don't be an independent no more. If you want to play some of the schools you're normally used to playing, that can happen. You're not going to play a whole Big Ten schedule. So you're non-conference, you want to play Navy because you want to keep some of your tradition. Cool, play Navy. Play some schools that you normally do. Rotate it. There's still ways to keep your quote-unquote tradition. But sometimes you have to take a step back and say, what's the best thing for the school? What could be the best thing for these athletes and the whole programs and university? What's best for them? Staying independent is still good. So I don't think there's a quote unquote wrong choice, but is there a more upside to finally joining a conference and getting more pluses there in that column than being independent? And it's always good to have change. Always good to have change. So that is a wrap for this episode. Thank you guys for watching and or listening. Please hit the like button and the subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Please follow it and rate it on Apple or iTunes. Leave a comment in the comment section down below to be part of the conversation. If you guys want to come on, send me a message at coach_Steve72 on Twitter. Check out all the affiliates in the description below. Thank you guys for watching and or listening. This is Coach Steve, and we will see you next time.